What if the biggest star in the WNBA, the player who single-handedly revived an entire league, was ready to walk away from it all? Not because of injury, not because of money, but because of betrayal. In a matter of hours, the rumor exploded across social media. A shocking act of disrespect inside the Indiana Fever locker room, a loyalty pact shattered, and a superstar, Caitlin Clark, pushed to her breaking point. Fans claimed one of her closest teammates had been humiliated, discarded without warning, and that Clark had finally had enough. It sounded like something out of a sports drama. A rising legend betrayed by her own organization, ready to walk away and protest. Twitter threads multiplied, YouTube videos lit up with words like shocking, betrayal, and Clark furious. Thousands of comments flooded in, and everyone, from casual fans to national sports pundits, wanted to know, what did the Fever just do? But here's where things get interesting. The story that captivated millions wasn't quite what it seemed. In fact, the most shocking part of it all isn't the betrayal that supposedly happened. It's the truth about how this entire rumor began and how it nearly tore apart one of the fastest-growing leagues in sports. Because before anyone could fact-check, before the truth even had a chance to catch up, the internet had already decided who was guilty. The mob had formed, the outrage was trending, and one of the most beloved athletes in America was suddenly at the center of a storm she never asked for. But how did a single unverified post turn into a full-blown crisis that threatened the future of the WNBA? And why did so many people believe it? That's where this story really begins. It started quietly. One tweet, buried deep in the chaos of a Tuesday morning timeline. No source, no proof. Just a few words claiming that Lexie Hull had been cut from the Indiana Fever. At first, almost nobody noticed. A couple of likes, a few replies, but within minutes, it spread. Reposted by fan pages, reshared by basketball blogs, quoted by influencers looking for a headline. The kind of post that starts as a whisper and ends up roaring across the internet. By midday, the rumor had escaped containment. Threads on X turned into essays, YouTube thumbnails screamed, Caitlin Clark's teammate betrayed, and TikToks were popping up with dramatic background music and blurry screenshots proving the story. Every version of the rumor told it slightly differently. Some said Hall had been waived, others insisted she'd been blindsided by management. But they all agreed on one thing. Caitlin Clark was furious. The story had everything a viral moment needs: a hero, a villain, and a personal betrayal. A young superstar standing up for a friend against a heartless organization. Fans were hooked. They didn't need confirmation, they needed sides. Within hours, comment sections turned into war zones. Some fans demanded accountability from the Fever front office, calling it a cold-blooded move. Others refused to believe it, defending the team and begging people to wait for facts. But the truth didn't matter anymore. Outrage always moves faster. You could see it happening in real time. A single rumor was feeding an entire ecosystem of content. Creators rushed to post before anyone else could break it. Algorithms pushed it further. Engagement exploded. By evening, national sports pages were sharing reports, citing anonymous sources that didn't actually exist. It was like a chain reaction of misinformation, each outlet quoting another in an endless loop, a digital echo chamber where rumor became news simply because enough people repeated it. And while the story spread like wildfire, no one stopped to ask the simplest question: where did this even come from? But the reason people believed it wasn't just because it sounded dramatic, it was because it felt personal. And to understand why, you have to know who Lexie Hull really is, and why her name carried so much weight inside that Indiana locker room. To understand why that rumor hit so hard, why it spread like wildfire and felt real even without proof, you have to know who Lexie Hull actually is. Lexie isn't the kind of player who makes nightly highlight reels. She doesn't throw no-look passes or drop 30 points a game. But inside locker rooms, she's the kind of player every superstar wants by their side. Hull came out of Stanford as a national champion, disciplined, smart, relentless on defense, the definition of a team-first player. She was drafted by the Fever in the first round of 2022, not because she was flashy, but because she was dependable. Coaches loved her work ethic, teammates trusted her, fans admired her grit.
She was the player who did everything right, even when nobody was watching. She'd guard the toughest opponent, dive for loose balls, set screens that freed up shooters, and never complain about her role. The kind of glue player that holds a team together when the spotlight fades. And that's exactly why fans believed the story. Because if someone like her, loyal, selfless, respected, had really been blindsided and cut without warning, it would have felt like a betrayal not just of her, but of everything the Fever claimed to be building. But there was another layer, a personal one. Lexie Hull wasn't just any teammate to Caitlin Clark. The two had grown close almost immediately. They shared the same competitive fire, the same background of coming from basketball families, the same obsession with winning the right way. Reporters had noticed it too. Clark mentioned Hull by name in interviews, praising her defense, her leadership, her chemistry on and off the court. During games, you could see it, the trust. Clark would draw defenders, kick the ball out, and Hull would be waiting in the corner, ready to drain the shot. It was instinctive. It was connection. Off the court, they were inseparable, attending team events together, showing up to community programs side by side, and appearing in photos that showed not just teammates, but friends. So when that rumor surfaced, that Hull had been discarded by management without Clark knowing, it struck a nerve. It felt believable because it matched something fans already wanted to believe, that star players should protect their own, and that loyalty still means something. To outsiders, it looked like a basketball headline. To fans of Caitlin Clark, it looked like personal betrayal. And just like that, the story wasn't about stats or contracts anymore. It became about loyalty, friendship, and trust. Three things that hit way harder than any roster move ever could. But the storm was only beginning, because as the rumor grew louder and more creators piled on, the story started to evolve, faster than anyone could keep up. What began as a single claim was now spiraling into something far bigger and far more dangerous. By the next morning, it wasn't a rumor anymore. It was a wildfire. What started as one anonymous post had exploded into a full-blown media circus. Sports pages, podcasts, reaction channels, everyone was talking about it. The story had momentum now, and nothing spreads faster online than outrage mixed with emotion. Within 24 hours, the internet had built its own version of reality. Articles cited tweets, tweets quoted YouTube videos referenced podcasts, each one claiming sources close to the situation, none of them offering proof. The rumor had become self-sustaining, a digital echo chamber feeding off itself, growing louder with every refresh. By the afternoon, major sports outlets that rarely covered the WNBA were suddenly breaking news updates about the Fever. Talking heads who hadn't mentioned women's basketball all year were now passionately debating whether Caitlin Clark had been betrayed. They didn't need confirmation, they needed content. It was the perfect storm for engagement. A league on the rise, a superstar with massive crossover appeal, a betrayal narrative that felt ripped straight out of a movie. Every thumbnail, every title, every post screamed drama. Caitlin Clark furious with Fever management, or Lexie Hull's shocking dismissal exposes the truth. Fans didn't realize it yet, but the story had left the hands of anyone involved. It was now running on autopilot, powered by algorithms and outrage. The truth no longer mattered. The story was too profitable to stop. Inside the Fever organization, silence only made things worse. No one issued a statement, no one corrected the record, and that silence became its own kind of confirmation. Fans read it as guilt. Creators read it as validation. Every hour without a response became proof that something terrible must have happened. Comment sections were chaos. Some fans demanded that Clark stand up for her teammate. Others claimed she already had, that she'd stormed into the GM's office or refused to play until Hull was brought back. Each new version was more dramatic than the last, and each one spread faster than the truth could catch up. Then came the fake insiders, anonymous accounts claiming to have direct knowledge. They spoke with authority, tossing around words like betrayal, crisis, and internal meltdown. None of it could be verified, but verification didn't matter anymore. People wanted the next twist, not the facts. Traditional journalists watched helplessly as the story snowballed beyond control. They couldn't debunk it fast enough because by the time they fact-checked one version, 3 more had already gone viral. The result was a perfect illusion, a story that felt too big, too detailed, and too emotional not to be true. Fans who had never even heard of Lexie Hull 2 days earlier were now passionately defending her, creating petitions, hashtags, and fan campaigns.
But the real reason this rumor became unstoppable wasn't just the media chaos or the algorithm. It was something deeper. The story tapped into a long-standing belief among WNBA fans, a fear that management didn't respect its players, especially its stars. And that's what made this rumor so powerful. It didn't just sound real, it felt real. But to understand just how this storm gained so much power, we have to step back and look at the bigger picture. The history of the WNBA itself and the tension that's been building between players and management for years. The rumor didn't go viral just because it was dramatic. It went viral because it made sense. Every piece of it lined up perfectly with what fans already believed about women's basketball. That players weren't respected, that front offices made careless decisions, and that star athletes were constantly being let down by the system meant to support them. In other words, this wasn't just a story about Lexie Hull. It was a story about every player who'd ever been underappreciated, underpaid, or overlooked, and fans felt that. The WNBA has always carried a complicated reputation. Despite the talent, the passion, and the loyal fan base, the league has often operated on tight budgets and thin margins, fewer roster spots, shorter seasons, paychecks that pale in comparison to the NBA. For years, players have spoken openly about frustrations, from travel issues and small locker rooms to feeling like second-class athletes. So when the rumor hit, it didn't sound impossible. It sounded familiar. Fans could easily imagine a front office cutting a hard-working player without explanation. They could imagine a superstar like Caitlin Clark, who had already brought record-breaking attention and money to the league, feeling disrespected and pushed too far. And it wasn't just about money or management. It was emotional. People wanted to believe that Clark cared deeply about her teammates. They wanted to see her as loyal, protective, willing to walk away from millions for the sake of principle. It's the kind of narrative fans love, the hero who won't sell out. That emotional hook made it impossible to ignore. Every fan scrolling through their feed saw a reflection of their own frustration about fairness, loyalty, and respect. The rumor became symbolic. It wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about what women athletes have always had to fight for. Then there was the local factor. The Indiana Fever weren't exactly a model franchise before Clark arrived. They'd cycled through coaches, endured losing seasons, and struggled with identity. When Clark was drafted, she was seen as a savior, the one who could finally turn it all around. So the idea that the same organization would betray her or her closest teammate, it didn't feel far-fetched. It felt like history repeating itself. The narrative practically wrote itself, an unstable front office making another tone-deaf move, alienating its biggest star. Fans connected the dots, even if those dots weren't real. And that's the thing about viral stories. They don't need to be true, they just need to fit.
If a story feels right emotionally, the human brain stops asking if it's right factually. Timing made everything worse. It was the off-season, the quiet stretch when no games are being played and fans are starving for content. A dead news cycle is the perfect breeding ground for drama. The rumor dropped into a vacuum, and content creators jumped at the chance to feed it. Within hours, people weren't just reacting to the rumor, they were expanding it. New theories, new insiders, entire podcasts dedicated to dissecting what Clark would do next. The story had mutated, and that's when it escalated to the most extreme version yet, one that would send shockwaves through the entire sports world. Because now, people weren't just saying Lexie Hull was betrayed. They were saying Caitlin Clark was done with the WNBA altogether. A storyline too explosive, too high stakes, and too perfect to resist. Then came the twist that sent the internet into overdrive. The rumor that Caitlin Clark was ready to walk away from the WNBA. At first, it sounded absurd. Why would the league's biggest star, the player who had single-handedly reignited national interest, ever consider leaving? But that's exactly what made it believable. If the betrayal was bad enough, if her loyalty had been broken, maybe it wasn't so far-fetched after all. One viral post claimed Clark had lost all faith in the Indiana Fever front office. Another alleged she was weighing her options and talking with her team about next steps. Those words, vague but dramatic, were all it took. Suddenly, sports talk shows were running with it. Headlines screamed across social media. Caitlin Clark to leave the WNBA. Fever star threatens to walk over locker room betrayal. The internet didn't need confirmation. It needed chaos. Within hours, analysts were speculating on live television about where she might go next. Some mentioned international leagues in Europe or Asia. Others floated the idea of Ice Cube's Big Three, claiming they were ready to make an offer. A few even suggested she might abandon basketball altogether, pivot to media, branding, or content creation, cashing in on her fame without the politics of pro sports.
Each version of the rumor grew wilder, but the core idea stayed the same. The WNBA's biggest star had had enough. And if that were true, the consequences would be catastrophic. Caitlin Clark isn't just a player. She's the heartbeat of the WNBA. Since she was drafted first overall, the numbers had been staggering. Attendance at Fever games tripled. TV ratings for WNBA broadcasts shattered records. Her rookie season pulled in over 1 million viewers per game, something the league had never seen before. Her jersey sales? #1 in all of women's sports. Clark wasn't just boosting the Fever, she was lifting the entire league. Sponsors, networks, and advertisers were all suddenly paying attention. She was the reason national broadcasts went prime time. She was the reason little girls across the country were watching women's basketball for the first time. So when fans heard she might be walking away, panic set in. Because if Clark left, it wouldn't just hurt the Fever, it could cripple the league. Podcasts broke down the math. Ticket sales, sponsorships, merchandise, broadcast deals. Analysts estimated her absence could cost the WNBA over $100 million in lost revenue. In a league already fighting for visibility and financial footing, that kind of hit could be devastating. But the emotional cost was even higher. Clark represented hope, proof that women's basketball could command mainstream attention, that it could be profitable, exciting, and respected. Losing her wouldn't just mean losing star power, it would mean losing momentum. And yet, the rumor kept spreading. Every hour brought a new headline, a new source, a new theory. Fans flooded the Fever's social media pages with anger. Some begged her to stay. Others demanded the entire front office resign. Petitions popped up online, calling for the team to apologize to Caitlin Clark and bring back Lexie Hull. Tens of thousands of signatures rolled in overnight. It had reached the point of hysteria. Security at Fever facilities was reportedly increased after waves of angry messages and threats poured in from across the country. Local news outlets couldn't keep up with the calls, emails, and comments demanding answers. The line between truth and fiction had completely vanished.
The internet had built a narrative so powerful that even reality couldn't compete with it. And in the middle of it all was Caitlin Clark, silent. She didn't post, she didn't respond, she didn't deny it. That silence became its own story. To fans, it was confirmation. To journalists, it was mystery. To the internet, it was gasoline on an already raging fire. The rumor had gone nuclear. The question now wasn't what happened, it was who could possibly stop it. But the storm was far from over, because what came next wasn't just about basketball. It was about culture, gender, and the way we consume drama in the age of social media. And that's where everything truly spiraled out of control. By now, the story wasn't just a rumor, it was a movement. The internet had split into factions, each convinced they were defending the truth. On one side were the loyalists, the fans who believed Caitlin Clark had been wronged and were ready to burn the entire Fever organization to the ground if that's what it took to defend her. On the other side were the skeptics, the ones insisting people were overreacting, begging everyone to wait for facts that never seemed to come. And then there was the third group, the instigators, the ones who didn't care what was true, they just wanted chaos. Social media turned into a battlefield. Hashtags like Justice for Lexie and Stand with Clark started trending nationwide. Petitions appeared overnight demanding the WNBA investigate mismanagement within the Fever organization. One of them reached 50,000 signatures in 3 days. Another called for the front office to resign. Comment sections became unfiltered war zones. People who had never watched a single WNBA game were suddenly experts on locker room politics. Every post, every tweet, every clip became a flashpoint. Some fans swore Clark had secretly quit. Others claimed she was still playing, but refusing media obligations. Every theory contradicted the last, and somehow every one of them gained traction. The irony? None of it came from Caitlin Clark herself. Not a statement, not a post, not even a like or a retweet. And that silence, that total absence of clarity, became the most powerful fuel of all. Fans started interpreting it in every possible way. She's angry, she's scared, she's planning something big. No one actually knew. But the less Clark said, the louder the internet got. Mainstream sports media was dragged into the frenzy. Outlets that once ignored the WNBA were now covering every twist like it was breaking news. Talk shows that usually spent their mornings dissecting NBA trades suddenly opened with, "What's going on with Caitlin Clark?" For many of them, it was their highest-rated segment of the week. And that's the twisted truth about viral chaos. Outrage gets clicks. Controversy gets engagement. The rumor had become a self-feeding machine, generating attention faster than anyone could stop it. Soon, the story wasn't even about Clark or Lexie Hull anymore. It was about what the story said about everything else. About women's sports, about respect, and how female athletes are treated compared to men. Female fans especially saw something deeper in all of it. For them, this wasn't just a fake rumor. It was symbolic. It was every instance of women being underpaid, undervalued, and unheard. Clark's supposed betrayal became a rallying cry. It wasn't about basketball anymore, it was about equality. But not everyone was genuine. As interest grew, trolls flooded the conversation, mocking the WNBA, twisting the situation into memes, weaponizing outrage for engagement. What started as concern for a player's treatment devolved into a circus of clout chasing, insults, and misinformation. Everywhere you looked, the truth was buried under a mountain of noise. It didn't matter who started the rumor. What mattered was that millions of people were emotionally invested in it. Sports forums crashed under traffic. YouTube thumbnails showed Clark with fake tears and dramatic red filters. TikToks racked up millions of views with titles like "Caitlin Clark exposes the truth about the WNBA." Each one used dramatic music, screenshots, and half-true captions to keep people watching just long enough for the algorithm to reward it. It was mass hysteria, digital, instantaneous, unstoppable. And inside that chaos, one truth became painfully clear. It didn't matter whether Clark ever said a word. The story had already been written for her. By the time journalists started quietly debunking parts of the rumor, it was too late. People didn't want the truth anymore. They wanted the feeling the rumor gave them. But that's the danger of viral narratives. They don't fade when they're disproven. They fade when something else replaces them. And before this one finally started to die down, it had already done irreversible damage. Because when the smoke cleared and the facts finally emerged, what we were left with wasn't a story about betrayal at all. It was a story about how quickly belief can overpower truth, and how one rumor can nearly shake an entire league to its core. And then, silence. After days of chaos, arguments, and speculation, something strange happened. The story just stopped moving. No statement from the Indiana Fever, no press conference, no cryptic post from Caitlin Clark. Just a stillness that felt almost eerie after the storm. That's when people started to look closer. Someone finally asked the question that should have been asked from the start. Where did this even come from? It turned out that the entire thing, the betrayal, the cut, the Caitlin Clark meltdown, all traced back to one unverified post. A single tweet from a random account with fewer than 1,000 followers. No credentials, no sources, no proof. But by the time anyone figured that out, it didn't matter. The damage was already done. The Fever never released Lexie Hull. There was no argument, no falling out, no emotional confrontation in the locker room. Hull was still part of the team, still showing up for practices, still doing her job. The same quiet, consistent professional she'd always been. Caitlin Clark never threatened to leave the WNBA, not once. She wasn't on strike, she wasn't locked in a secret feud with management. She was simply focused, training, preparing, doing what great athletes do, tuning out the noise. All the insider reports, all the sources close to the situation, they were just echoes. One rumor quoting another in an endless feedback loop, a chain of digital whispers bouncing from one screen to the next until it looked like truth. It was a perfect example of how information mutates online. One vague post becomes a headline becomes a tweet becomes a video, and before long, fiction feels more real than fact. The fever, no pun intended, around this story wasn't about what happened. It was about what people felt should have happened. It spoke to something deeper, the mistrust between fans and the institutions they follow. Fans wanted accountability, they wanted transparency, and in the absence of those things, they filled in the blanks themselves. The truth wasn't scandalous, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even newsworthy. But that's what made it so powerful, because the lie had been so much more entertaining. And for content creators, outrage was good business. A headline saying, "Clark betrayed," will always spread faster than one saying, "Rumor false." The truth doesn't trend, emotion does. When the facts finally started to emerge, many creators simply moved on to the next big story, the next controversy, the next piece of clickbait. No apologies, no corrections, just silence. The same silence that had fueled the chaos in the first place. And in that silence, one uncomfortable realization hung in the air. This wasn't just a one-time event. It was a preview of the future. Because in today's media landscape, truth isn't what's proven, it's what's repeated. One post, one rumor, one spark. That's all it takes. The Caitlin Clark story wasn't about betrayal inside a locker room. It was about betrayal inside an algorithm. How the platforms we trust to inform us are designed to manipulate us. And by the time the truth caught up, everyone, the players, the fans, the journalists, had already been played. But there's still one final question that lingers long after the dust settled. Why did this story capture so many people so quickly when deep down most of them knew it didn't quite add up? The answer lies in what the story represented, not what it claimed. And that's where the real lesson begins. In the end, this wasn't really a story about Caitlin Clark. It wasn't even a story about the WNBA. It was a story about us, about how easily we believe what we want to believe. The rumor spread because it felt right, because it played into our emotions, our outrage, our sympathy, our hunger for drama. It didn't need to be true. It just needed to sound like something that could be true. That's the secret of modern storytelling online. The best lies are the ones that feel familiar.
We live in an era where outrage is entertainment. The truth moves slowly, but emotion travels at the speed of a scroll. And once something goes viral, facts become optional. People don't share what's real, they share what resonates. That's what happened here. Fans wanted to believe Caitlin Clark was the kind of athlete who would stand up for her teammate no matter the cost. They wanted to believe Lexie Hull was a victim of a cold system. They wanted to believe that loyalty still mattered in a world where money and clicks usually win. And for a few days, that belief united millions of people, even if it was built on nothing. But belief is powerful. It creates movements, it fuels headlines, it makes ordinary people feel like participants in something bigger. And once the belief takes root, even the truth can't dig it out. This story revealed something uncomfortable about the world we live in now. The line between reality and narrative is disappearing. One anonymous post can shake an entire industry. One rumor can force billion-dollar networks to respond. One algorithmic spark can turn fiction into fact if enough people want it to be. In the case of Caitlin Clark, the truth eventually came out. The rumor faded. But the next one won't be far behind, because the internet doesn't need truth, it needs fuel. And as long as outrage, drama, and emotion remain the easiest ways to keep people watching, rumors like this will never really die. They'll just change names, change faces, change targets. So the next time a story like this floods your feed, a shocking betrayal, a leaked report, a player furious at management, pause for a second. Ask where it came from. Ask who benefits. Ask whether you're being informed or being entertained. Because maybe the real power doesn't belong to the rumor or the algorithm or even the superstar at the center of it all. Maybe the real power has always belonged to the people who choose what to believe. And in a world where belief spreads faster than truth, that power can change everything.